and good morning in North America and Latin America and Central America and the rest of the world. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today on our end of the year hangout for World Smart City Forum. I'm Gordon Feller here in San Francisco, and I'm your moderator and helping to coordinate the World Smart City Forum. Those of you who are unfamiliar with the forum, check us out on Twitter. World Smart City is both our Twitter handle and our hashtag. And we welcome your comments and questions during the course of this 1-hour session today. It's November here, and we're going to be trying to use this opportunity today to wrap up some of our activities for 2017 and think ahead for the next year with a special guest that we have, who I'll introduce in a moment to you. But first, let me explain a little bit about what's happened this year with the World Smart City Forum. As some of you know, we've transitioned to a new user-friendly web platform that makes it easier for our community to interact, each of you with the other. If you haven't joined the community, make sure to do so at worldsmartcity.org. But also, we've just completed in Barcelona a special event, the second that we've convened. We're mostly a virtual community, but we do convene physical events. The first one was a couple of summers ago in Singapore, and we had 400 plus people from 25 countries join us for a full day program. And we just repeated that in Barcelona. And if you look at our Twitter feed, you can see the summary that we've just published about the event that was convened during the Smart Cities special event that takes place annually in November in Barcelona, where our special guest was also there during the Smart City Forum that took place. So a little bit of background about World Smart City Forum. This is a joint collaboration of 3 international agencies that are based in Geneva. The initial founder, the International Electrotechnical Commission, brings together all of the world's leaders who are responsible for the electric infrastructure of the world we know. And that includes not just public utility commissions and ministries of energy, but also investor-owned utilities and the companies that provide them with systems and solutions, as well as nonprofit organizations, research institutes, and others. And this is the global standards organization focused on the future of electricity and energy around the world. That organization, the IEC in Geneva, is joined in this forum by 2 partners: the International Telecommunications Union, which is a very competent international agency, one of the specialized agencies of the United Nations. And from their base in Geneva, they help all the telecom agencies of the world, all of the ministries of telecom of the world, all of the telecom providers of the world, private and public, to work together and coordinate their activities so that we have common global open standards for all of our communications and information systems. And then the third organization, which is equally important and also based in Geneva, is the International Standards Organization, otherwise known to many of you as ISO or ISO. And so these 3 organizations are equal collaborators in the World Smart City Forum to look at how smart cities can be enabled and supported and facilitated in their development by the emergence of open, secure, global standards that can be used and applied by not just public sector agencies, but private actors in the enterprise world and nonprofit organizations of various kinds in the independent sector. So that's a background. Now, let me introduce to you our special guest today, who's going to walk us through the new digital deal that will enable smart cities to emerge more successfully in 2018 than they have even in 2017. The man who I'm introducing, Bas Boorsma, has been for 10 years an executive at Cisco, based in Amsterdam, responsible for smart city systems. These systems include hardware systems, software systems, and services. He is responsible right now, at the end of his career at Cisco, for Northern Europe, particularly Internet of Things enablement and development for cities. And he's been working with many cities around the world over these 10 years. In Seoul, South Korea, there was a major project. In Sangdo, South Korea, there was a major project. I worked with him during my years at Cisco headquarters on those kinds of projects. He worked with Amsterdam. He worked with San Francisco. These were in the early days of that 10-year process that he's been through. He's now completing his career at Cisco, and he's going to be moving on at the first of the year to become the CEO of Rainmaking Urban, which will be based in Amsterdam, a new organization attached to the Rainmaking International Enterprise, which hopefully we'll get a chance to learn more about that in the coming months. But follow him on Twitter, and you'll have an opportunity to learn more about what he's doing in the coming days. But now let me offer the platform, the forum to Bas, who's sitting in his home in Amsterdam, and give him the floor to tell us about where a new digital deal for cities and for urban communities is coming from in 2017 and where it's going to be going in 2018, to give us a chance to look back but also look ahead. So Bas, the floor is yours. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Gordon. That's been a very, very kind and gentle introduction. Can you see my slides?
Yes, absolutely.
Excellent. So very good. So you introduced me so well. There's very little that I can add, but let me add a few things. I've been working at Cisco for close to 11 years, but I've been working in the space of smart cities for over 15 years. And you know, I always like to joke that at this particular point, I actually am clueless as to what a smart city actually is. It's changed so much in terms of definitions, what we mean by it, what we want from it, what we expect by it. And in fact, there are only two words in the term, smart and cities, and I actually have kind of an issue with both, because smart, what does it mean, and why does this apply to cities only? But let's get beyond that point. 15 years, it's been a long time, close to 11 years at Cisco, and yes, I'm the author of a new digital deal, which has come out on September 1, with the Kindle version coming out on December 1. So if you prefer the digital version, and I suppose many of you do, then just wait for a few days and that version will be out there. I got 3 sons, so I have a very, very, very strong stake in the future and getting it right, making sure that digitization, that we actually do the right thing with it for our communities, for future generations. And I take a very critical perspective in it, a positive perspective, but also a critical. And I think it can best be explained by stating that I was born in the year 29 BG, before Google. And I think most of us probably know that Google was founded in 1998, so we can all do the math as to how old I am. But the point that I want to make here, Gordon, is that essentially I'm old enough to be, standing with one leg in that old world, being fairly critical about some of the new stuff that's emerging, that's coming into our lives. But given the career that I've had, given the stuff that I do, given the type of work that I'm into, the startups, the ideas that we see, the innovations that we help drive, I'm also a huge optimist. I'm a huge optimist, and I'm a net tech optimist in many ways. Not because I believe technology is the solution to everything, but really because I look at the internet and things network as providing us with the role models to do things better and differently. And I think this is exactly this balance of being critical, but also being, the net tech optimist, that if we can combine it in the right ways in terms of carving out smart city strategies, that actually is a first step towards getting ourselves to have a new digital deal. So here's a slide on the book. It's great there. You can see the URL for those that are interested. What I do in the book, Gordon, is I'm not just focusing just on the practicalities of, what does it take to have a smart city project and what are the successes out there and what are the great stories. I take a little bit of a broader perspective, and obviously you could have a very, very broad perspective in terms of where did the internet come from, where did digitization come from, and what does it mean to our cities, or have a very long sociological kind of narrative on this. I didn't go that wide and that broad, but what I did do is I tried to frame digitization. I said, look, at least there are 2 components there, which is what you could call the net of everything that's countable in it. All the nodes in the network, all the people that are getting connected, things that are getting connected, the amount of data that's out there, and all the stuff that we can do with the data. That's really the technological part. But then there's also the network paradigm, and I take that in a much more non-technological way. It's the rise of a paradigm that determines how we organize ourselves, and it's a step away from the industrial age of central organization, centralized production, centralized government, centralized education systems, centralized healthcare systems with their inoculation programs, central clocks. I mean, all of that came out by and large out of the industrial age. And what we've gotten into over the past several decades, and we only see the influence, really, the impact making it fully felt right now, is what you could call a network paradigm, where things are organized not so much centralized, but distributed, without a center, without periphery. And I think you can see this in almost every aspect of society. I mean, whether it's I love the example of energy, right? So if you think of the traditional energy grid, you have a coal power plant and it's distributing energy, and then 50% or 40% of the energy gets lost before it makes it to your front door. I mean, that's the old, unsustainable, but well-known way of distributing energy to our homes, to our businesses in the city. Now, if you think of a smart energy grid, then obviously, you have so many points distributed where you're actually producing energy. It can be your roof, can be, some solar panel somewhere. And it gets, if you don't use that energy may get kind of rerouted to the closest point of demand nearby. And you need all the intelligence on top of that layer to make sure that the billing goes well, and that we can actually have the right type of balance on the energy, on the energy networks, and we have the kind of right of demand response on the network. If you think of that's the Internet of Energy. I mean, it's totally distributed in its ultimate form. And that's a very physical example. But also think of education. Look at learning. Look at how our kids learn. They still have teachers. They need teachers. But the role of the teacher has changed. It's no longer just that holder of a monopoly of knowledge determining what a kid learns or what it doesn't, right? The teacher is a coach. Learning is becoming something way more distributed. And it goes for all of these examples here. Think of work. It's become place and time independent for so many jobs. So many of all of us have grown to find it's totally normal that we don't clock in an employer's at 9 a.m. Monday morning at one given office location. This is really turned distributed. And Gordon, when you and I collaborated at Cisco, like 8 years ago, we were discussing third work locations, smart work centers. That was really exotic at that time. But right now, people find this pretty normal. All of this is getting distributed. And so this is that network paradigm. Now, if you think of that network paradigm and how it translates into new economic principles, here are a few, and I don't have the time to go into each and every one of them, but I would hope that many of the people that have tuned in today have read the book Platform Revolution. And if you haven't, then I can really, really recommend you to read that book, Platform Revolution. And it's really about platforms like Uber and like Airbnb, but it actually shows you not just on platform, how the economic fundamentals are changing dramatically and how much has already changed. And here are some of the key elements that you see here, from centralized to distributed, from asset-centric to service-centric, from producers and consumers to prosumers. Think of Facebook. I mean, it doesn't create content, you do. Think of smart energy grids. There's not just producers and consumers, you now have prosumers, and so on. I mean, this is such a disruptive change, and I think we're just getting started. Whenever I keynote, I always like to make the joke that digitization is a huge journey, like Lord of the Rings. And if we were to compare that entire journey indeed to Lord of the Rings, then where we currently stand, Frodo has just left the Shire. It's that early. We can just see how these economic fundamentals are making their impact felt. We look at Uber and Airbnb and say, well, they're pretty cool, but you know what? That's just they're like the exceptions. That's that type of platform economics. We're just seeing that in that space, but actually it's becoming really dominant. Think of like in California, you now have, you know, doctor on demand at your home within the hour. You can Uber a doctor. Those doctors they tie themselves to a platform because they want to make a few additional dollars on top of their hospital job, and so you have this platform. You can get a doctor to your door instantly, just like that. And this is just affecting every domain in our society. Now, this is moving very, very fast, and not everyone is keeping up with this. And like with every big journey, like the one of Frodo in Lord of the Rings, you're going to run into a lot of dangers and a lot of you know, issues, a lot of issues to overcome, lots of challenges. And I think one of the major challenges, and this is definitely something like any community, whether it's a smart city program or whether it's a digital agenda for an entire region or a country or a state in the United States, I mean, wherever you are, whenever you drive such an agenda, you will have to take into account what this type of disruption looks like. Because if you don't, then you may actually risk the chance, as we often already are, that we're going to have innovation without navigation, that we're going to disrupt without any particular goal in mind, that we're just going to see a lot more digital divides than we already have. First problem here is the loss of jobs. I mean, the World Economic Forum stated earlier this year that against every 5 jobs lost due to automation, only two new jobs emerge. So a lot of people say, well, you know, just let's wait for this for a little while, because let's face it, every new technological revolution has really brought about a huge amount of new jobs, and that may take a while, but that will happen. Well, quite frankly, I don't know. And I don't think any of us can tell whether that's going to happen. What we do see right now is that there's a net loss of jobs, and that's going to prove disruptive. And my challenge, the challenge that I see there is that if a smart city doesn't address that, then how smart can that city actually be called? Because if you have armies of people protesting the street against those things that were going to be have the city associated with being smart in the first place, then what's the point of doing that, right? So we have to take into account these disruptions. We need a new digital deal in order to get this right, to actually say, what does it mean to address those loss of jobs? Can we? And if and what would a working approach look like? But it's not just jobs; it's also enterprise. I mean, Cisco actually came up with the bold statement at one point. John Chambers came up with that statement that, and we did a lot of research on that within the company, that 40% of the enterprise that exists today will no longer exist in 10 years from now, which I think is an incredible number. And it doesn't mean that 40% is just waiting and are just not digitizing at all. They're just way not innovative enough. They're just slightly too slow at what they do. And they're likely to somehow, you know, run into their Kodak moment, and this even perhaps particularly happens to be true for lots of companies that are already digital and believe that they're on the right side of the divide here, but they may not be. And talking about divides, we have those new digital divides. It's not just old and young like in the 90s, like old not being online and young being online. We now have we have urban versus rural. We have people that have truly embraced the culture that comes with digitization, and those people that somewhat mistakenly continue to believe that they're online. You know, and there's a big difference between being somewhat online and firmly standing in an embrace of the culture of digitization, the skill sets associated with it, the promise that it holds, the type of jobs and businesses that come out of it. And quite frankly, if we do not address those multiple shades of gray that can be called the new digital divides, then the challenge is going to become even larger. And then we're seeing so many innovations happen, and many of those innovations are absolutely fundamentally exciting. They're great, but you could ask yourself the question whether society can sufficiently keep up with some of that change. Culture takes years, sometimes decades, to amend itself with new values, new beliefs, a new core belief system, if you will. that is up to speed with its time. Technology is now moving faster than society can keep up with, and that can be a challenge. I mean, I made a joke in the book, and it's actually not a joke. When parents were confronted with their kids all chasing Pokemons on Pokemon Go, like, how much do we like this? These kids are just walking around and they're not looking out traffic. And then kind of the argument later on was, look, it's fantastic because these kids now having some physical exercise outside rather than being stuck behind a screen, doing Xbox or whatever. That's a very silly type of argument. We often have embraced these innovations before we can actually really arrive to a conclusion as to whether we think they're morally good or not. So we need a new digital deal, and not just because of the challenges and the negatives that come with it, but also in order to get what is potentially positive right. And I think this is another thing that comes with digitization. That comes also with smart city projects. We've been like kids in a candy store for the past 25 years, and we've come to experience most of the digital innovations as exciting, as great, as bringing efficiencies and convenience, and they have. It's been fundamentally great in that sense. But there is no rule, there is nothing carved in stone that promises that the next wave of digital innovations is going to be good by default. We just don't know. We just do not know whether the next wave of change is going to have a positive impact or whether it's going to be mildly positive. We will need a plan, especially because it moves so fast and because there are so many moral and practical questions to be addressed at this point. If we want to get smart city programs to be right, that we want them to, that they're going to have the impact that we hope that they will have, we got to come up with a plan. And the type of comparison that I typically like to draw is with being in a canoe on a very, very wild river. Now we can sit on that river in that canoe and we can say, we think this is great. We love the flow. We love this river, and we're going to end up somewhere great. But then the chances are that we're going to run into some rock and we're going to, into serious pain. Or it can be on that same river, in that same canoe, and you can have a paddle and say, I love this river. We're onto this huge stream. There's this huge power of this river, but I'm going to paddle in the right direction. We're going to make sure that we're going to navigate this river. And that process of navigation, that to me is a new digital deal. Digitization is happening, whether we like it or not. And if I can kind of abuse the famous quote of John Lennon. John Lennon once said, while you're making other plans. You could actually say that digitization is what happens while you're making other plans. Smart cities are happening while you're making other plans. A friend of mine, the CTO of the city of Amsterdam, he once said, Airbnb has had a more profound impact on my city than any of the smart city initiatives that have come out of my municipal organization. And I like that statement, quite simply because it tells you how fast things are moving, and cities are not necessarily waiting for the traditional smart city programs to make the big change. If we want to get it right, again, even smart city projects need to keep up with the pace that gets determined by digitization at this particular point. I think it's important that we take a critical but positive perspective. I'm critical. You just heard me say critical things right now, but what I think is important is that we step away from the visuals that you see here. Like, it's like this PowerPoint version of cities and smart cities and how wonderful it's all going to be. But we need to be equally critical of the prophets of doom that are out there. Like, it's all Big Brother is watching you, and we're going to be in a totalitarian society, and our TVs are spying on us. Doesn't mean we shouldn't be critical. Oh, absolutely, we should be very critical. But I think we need to find that right balance in arriving at a new digital deal. So I think I made the point. I think we need a new digital deal, and there are many more arguments as to why. If you want to read up on that, definitely read the book. But in order to drive the point home for this hangout, what I did as part of the book is I defined a framework of building blocks. a framework of building blocks that will allow you to kind of benchmark your activities, your plans, your strategies for your smart city in such a way that you have an optimal chance of success. There cannot be any technical manual how to do this right. There is not one golden road. There's not one book, not one manual that says, if you just take these 100 steps, then you're 100% guaranteed of success. It doesn't exist, and anyone that claims that does exist is simply not telling you the truth. But there is a lot of experience out there, and I think if you look at that experience, you can actually condense that into some type of a framework, which is what I've tried to do. I don't think I've been particularly new or novel around this, but I've tried to bring it together comprehensively. So I think for anyone with some experience in the smart city space, and I'm sure that among the people that tune in today, that are many practitioners, you will probably look at these building blocks and say, hey, I recognize those. I've actually articulated those myself as well. First of all, I mean, I'm not going to through all 20 of them, but let me just pick on a few here. So leadership, you know, if you want to lead innovation, if you want to lead innovation agendas, you got to be ready for that. And it sounds easy, but it isn't, because innovation typically starts in A, hopefully. You project to arrive in B, but actually you may arrive in C. That's typical for innovation. And then even C can explode in your face. Now that's a pretty tall order for a person that needs to kind of explain to the people that voted him or her into office as to why something hasn't worked and why taxpayers' money was spent on it. And the same holds true for a leader of a company, you know, saying like, you know, we need to face up to our stakeholders and quarterly numbers, and we just want to work on stuff that we know is going to work. So it takes a particular type of leader. Leadership, not just on the public sector side, not just the cities, but also the companies that are getting involved in smart city initiatives. So I think if we think of technology companies, will have to grow accustomed to the very idea of being societal leaders, not just corporate leaders, but societal leaders. I think when Mark Zuckerberg hires 3,000 people to check false news and stuff like that, it's a very small beginning. It's a good beginning, perhaps, but it's a small beginning. We need to step up. We, all of us, need to step up. Digital ready governance. There is another. Digitization is a little department. It can't belong to the IT manager, because by and large, it's not even about technology. It's about culture. It's about change. It's about skill sets. It's a horizontal, and it needs to be managed across the different verticals within an organization, including a municipality. So that type of governance needs to be in place with the right entities having the full mandate and resources to manage this well. What you see with all of these first quarter of building blocks is that this is about the community. This is about citizens. And this is where smart city initiatives in the past got it wrong, where a lot of technology companies got it wrong. We've seen so many fancy technology projects that went down as a smart city project that were well publicized, and people kind of forgot to actually have a conversation with the citizen, and that kind of didn't work out all that well. It's very important that all of this starts out with the community, that it really starts out with a vision that really, really belongs to that community, that actually it comes down to the actual needs and challenges, but also the comparative advantages that a particular community has. If your city or community is really a great tourist destination, then become even better at it because of digitization, for instance. But the same goes for your challenges. So to start out with a community is a fundamentally important thing. But then next, you're going to look into the art of connecting everything. And next, technology does come in. And the art of connecting everything is something which tends to be overstated, yet also underestimated. So we talk a lot about the potential of data. We talk a lot about edge computing capabilities and all of that. And we talk a lot about it. At the same time, the daily practice is very often that we completely forget the most important parts of the art of connecting everything, I overheard the CTO of the city of Philadelphia, Mr. Brennan, state, I hear so many people talk about great apps and great stuff. And where I start? I don't start out with great apps. I don't start with all the fancy stuff. I start out with a fundamental, rudimentary broadband infrastructure, because if I don't have that, I'm going to run into issues later on. So, some communities talk smart, but they don't have the rudimentary stuff in good order. But then also, even then, there might be so many other elements. I take this slide from my Cisco practice. So there's some stuff that is typical Cisco, but I love it as a reference architecture. Whether you like Cisco or whether you don't, you can just disregard the name for now for a little bit. It doesn't matter. What is important about this particular slide here is that it provides you a picture as to where you need to drive a lot of convergence, a convergence of access, convergence of end devices sensors into one architecture where you have a convergence of access technologies, not just one access technology. Fixed access is never going to drive it all. Wi-Fi is never going to do it all. Free 4G is never going to do it all. No, 5G is not the holy grail. It's not going to solve everything. You're going to also need LoRa, Sigfox, and narrowband IoT. You're going to need a host of those access technologies, and you need to manage them well within a seamless and secure architecture. Because here's another thing, that's obviously the cybersecurity element there, and a lot of people think of this. This is big, top of mind for many people, but how do you do this well? I mean, at this particular point, we're monitoring 2.5 million potential cyber threats around the world per second. Take that number in, Gordon. 2.5 million potential cyber threats around the world each second. And it's going to get worse because of the huge amount of end devices there within an architecture. So you need to really bring this together in a seamless and secure way. The more this is siloed, the less interoperable the technologies that get applied, the less standards are abided to, or the fewer standards are abided to, the more problematic it becomes. I've been using the word convergence here to describe what should be ideal in architecture like this. But there's also a divergence of intelligence in the network, because you're not just going to take the centralized perspective on this, where you do all the computing in a data center. Think of the future vehicle, future car, the driverless vehicle, and it needs to stop at a particular intersection, and the traffic light is communicating to the car. It should be doing it directly. The analytics should be happening right there on the spot at the intersection, and at the street cabinet level, you probably require a lot of intelligence. So for latency's sake, signal to a data center and back, because by that time that car is already past the intersection, or may have run into another car. So you need a lot of intelligence on the edge of the networks, but you also need that intelligence on the edge of the networks actually to counter cyber security threats, because most of the cyber breaches happen at end device level, like credit card readers, video cameras. We know that, right? So we need to ensure that we have intelligence at the edge of the network to get that right. So all of this is part of the art of connecting everything. And you can't just take one element out. You can't say, well, I love all of this, but you know what? I'm going to pilot something. I'm going to do a number of these things, and then I'll think cybersecurity. And once it becomes big, then I'll think cybersecurity. No, you actually have to do this right from day one. You actually have to get cybersecurity in from day one, just to give that, to use that one example. Quite simply because in the case of this particular case of cybersecurity, initial designs have a nasty habit of living on for a very long time. They can just zombie on for a very long time. And in fact, the entire internet is a great example, right? I mean, if we were to design the internet today, to meet the type of cybersecurity requirements that we have for it today, we would not design the internet the way it has been, the way it operates today. We would design it completely different. So it's a great example. You need to get this right from day one. You need to have a broader approach to this. So back to the 20 building blocks. Here I've tried to cover the art of connecting everything. I've touched on cybersecurity. I've touched on standards just there a little bit, and this is an important point to make. And I think that there's a number of people in this audience that might actually have a specific interest in standards here. The important thing here is that for so much we don't have a standard yet. They're coming, they're emerging. What a city can do to get this right is to abide as much by industry standards and to demand in their RFIs and their RFPs that the private sector partners that they work with, that they abide by those standards by all means, because the less we're working with standards, the more chaotic it's going to be, the more siloed data is going to be, the less cyber secure it will be. So the more standards we abide to, the better it is. But if the standards aren't there, then at least what cities can do is to say, we demand interoperability. So make sure that whatever you as a partner in this larger architecture, what you're going to provide, that is by all means interoperable. And sometimes that's a counterintuitive thing for companies that say a startup that come up with something that they believe is a revolutionary technology that they should put a major patent plus walled garden around. Great, but if the technology is totally not interoperable with other stuff, then and it can't be exchanged for something else provided by another vendor, then that is a particular issue on the level of cybersecurity, for the seamlessness of all that you try to drive. So it's a major issue and a major building block to be had there. Moving on a little bit there, and I'm conscious of time, and I want to make sure we have a lot of discussions here, so I move on. I'll try to finish very quickly here. But ecosystems, I mean, none of us is going to do this alone. Government is not going to do this alone. Private sector is not going to do this alone. Big companies cannot do this alone. I mean, I work for a big company. I think many of those technology companies have found out the hard way that they can't do this alone. You need actual partners in, yes, public sector, but also within private sector. Big needs to work with small, and this is particularly true for new industries like the Internet of Things, if you call it a new industry. It's not just big talking to big and small talking to small. Small companies, startups, scale-ups, they're the ones that are really good at disruptive innovations. That's typically what corporates wouldn't be doing naturally. They're much better at incremental innovation. So you need that type of collaboration. You need those ecosystems to collaborate in order to get these strategies right. When you think of new delivery models and business architectures, there's a long discussion to be had. I think typical for smart city projects in the past is that people try to do it in an old school way and say, well, we're a company, we got something to sell, and then the city, that is the municipality, is the buying center. They're the customer. So people were always looking at this type of bilateral sales relationship. If you think of the smart city of tomorrow, it's not just a client-vendor relationship, it's a marketplace. It's becoming a marketplace where sometimes a producer is a producer, a consumer is a consumer, and a prosumer is a prosumer. But those roles can actually change within that marketplace quite easily. It becomes even more fuzzy, if you will, if you think of it from a data perspective. So where data becomes more valuable and the stuff that comes out of the data. So smart cities are increasingly becoming a marketplace, and with it, the way we deliver, the way we make money, the type of business architectures underneath are shifting. And my best hope for the smart city and how it evolves is that it, in a way, that it dies. That the day that the city as a service emerges is the day that the old smart city dies. And I think you see that shift emerging right now. So that comes down to delivery models. I'm moving on a little bit because I'm trying to cover too much here, but good design. Bad design results in digital divides, period. You need good design. And it's not just on the user interface level. It's on every other building block here. You need good design. You need good design on your community communications. You need good design on your art of connecting everything, the architectures that you're proposing. Good design and vision. Good design in your ecosystems. To really put design thinking into what you do is so important. Shouldn't just become an engineering exercise, shouldn't just become an exercise of the bureaucrats at a governmental entity. It should be a design thinking exercise, which looks at the complexity of what you want to achieve and then kind of reverse engineer as to how to get to that point. So good design is everything. proof of value is so very important. We often think, when we think of smart cities, we think of, running pilots, learning stuff, and pilots are great. And proof of concepts are great, but often we put too much attention on proof of concepts, proving out technologies that have already been proven. Technology very often is not the bottleneck here. Technologies can typically work today. And often we don't need a proof of concept. What we need is a proof of value, being able to demonstrate that the type of value, be it economical dollars, whether it's social or whether it's in environmental terms or strictly in mobility terms, that we can actually measure that that value is out there. And finally, proof of values, the ethical perspective. Is it what we do? Is it right? The city that we're building through the tools, the strategies, the innovations that we help build, is that a city that you want to live in, that you want your kids to live in? If we introduce new innovations, are we taking things on interface value? Are we sufficiently aware of what's under the hood? Do we still get it? And how do we get it right, especially in the age of artificial intelligence? What I found extremely visionary is one of the final White House policy papers that came out of the Obama White House was published in October last year. And it stated that every educational institute in the United States that is working on artificial intelligence should integrate ethics as part of its curriculum. I found that extremely brave and good point of view. I think that type of points of view need to be made part of the tapestry. That's our smart city thinking and our smart city strategies. So, Gordon, let me pause there for a second, because I've been talking for, I think, a little bit over half an hour, which is quite a long time, and I want to make sure we have some discussion here. So, do you see any questions there?
Well, lots of questions. So, if you're ready, I'll dive into them.
Okay, I am ready.
All right. So, first question is about your perspective on this standards, global open standards. You talked quite a bit about the need for that around security and around the interoperability of devices, as well as the security of those devices and also of the network as a whole. And that this is now something that cities want to address because they perceive the vulnerabilities and they don't want their citizens or their city services to be compromised. Can you talk a little bit about other areas where global open standards will help to shape the outcome of this current push towards smarter cities? Perhaps it's around the role of the citizen, that there should be not just a secure engagement and interface with citizens who make up the city, but maybe there are other ways that standards would apply, just to take that one example.
Well, it's such a big topic, and actually, if for some people it may on the first glance it may be a boring topic, but it's actually, if you ask me, it's one of the most exciting topics, because this is what is going to define, what's going to differentiate success from failure, in how digitization is going to apply to you and me, to our communities, our families, our schools, and first of all, in whether it matures at all or not. One of the reasons why, for instance, smart homes have been so slow in emerging is for a complete lack of standards that allowed for interoperability. So if you like your lights to be connected to the network at your home, you can buy Philips Hue, for instance. Beautiful product. I got it in my home, but it doesn't talk to anything else, right? That's an issue. And I think we got to get out of that. So smart homes are a particularly nasty example where things could have moved so much faster, but where things haven't, quite simply because of a lack of standardization. You see some other spaces, for instance, when it comes to energy, smart energy grids, it's actually moving. It's actually happening. And that's a very important thing. I think also when it comes to street automation, where the light industry meets mobility, where it meets street furniture, standards are starting to emerge and people start to listen to each other from different industries. So the light industry, IT industry, for instance, you see those industries starting to talk to each other, and some of the companies are moving faster than others. So that's a very good thing. And the more standards we arrive at, the more interoperability we get, the more cybersecure it will be, the more trust communities will have with regard to innovations that are being proposed to them. But also the more free-flowing data will be. So if you want to be able to unsilo some relevant data and make sure that you leverage it in full and that communities leverage it in full, then you need to make sure that stuff is interoperable. And the best way to actually ensure that you're going to be interoperable in all of those different layers and verticals and silos, it is by having standards in place. I think we're going to see standards and ways of benchmarking important aspects of digitization in ways that we haven't given a lot of thought of yet. And so one of the things that I overheard, I really like that, is for instance, there's a lot of concern out there as to whether how many appliances actually can listen into your data or can actually spy on you. I gave that example just now in one of my slides on television sets. So there was this crazy thing about Samsung smart TVs being more vulnerable and people being able to spy on you in whatever way. At one point, people may say, look, I like a Nest thermostat. Now, it may be true that if you have a Nest thermostat, more of your data may get shared with others than if I have some other thermostat in my home. However, I don't care. But whether you care or not, you should actually be able to get to an understanding as to what rating comes with that particular device. So you have those labels, like energy labels, like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, whether your home is really economical or not, right? And this type of ways of labeling stuff. We're probably going to get that for smart appliances. You just want to know how vulnerable it is and how much data is being shared. Like this device, if you buy it, it's got label G, all your data will be on the street. If you buy that device, you will have label A, and it's going to be really, really secure about your data. Stuff like that, we're going to see that. So we're going to be able, probably we're going to get to a lot of standards that will help us govern that.
Good. That really helps, and thanks for clarifying this. So another question, which of course, if you can contemplate this, which cities do you see the most interesting kinds of progress or interesting kinds of initiative, and why? So for instance, Copenhagen, the Denmark Outdoor Lighting Laboratory, you've often referred to it as one of the best cases where a city has invented a new kind of public-private partnership. Can you say why you think that? Or maybe you'll choose another city, Amsterdam, Barcelona, Reykjavik, Iceland, you name the city, but tell us why you think that initiative really stands out as different from the others.
So I quite frankly, there's not one city that can actually really claim that they've done it. I mean, this is still, everyone is learning, and there's not one clear winner. There isn't even a clear group of winners, but there are cities that are doing a better job than others, and some of the cities you just pointed out are great examples. Copenhagen is definitely one of my favorites. Reykjavik, but also Singapore and Dubai are good examples, and for different reasons. They do different things well. One of the things important is that sometimes for those of us really deeply involved in smart city work and smart city thinking, sometimes forget why we're doing it in the first place. So to be smart for just the purpose of being smart doesn't make sense. It needs to actually hit a larger agenda. It needs to address particular care abouts. In the case of Copenhagen, it's always been green. That city has set its target that it wanted to be carbon neutral by the year 2025. And the great thing for that city is that it's going to be getting to that goal. The sad thing for the world is that it's one of the very, very few cities that are actually going to achieve that goal. But the good news is for Copenhagen that it's going to achieve that goal. And that big vision is something that everyone cares about in the community deeply. And they said at one point, all right, we can do all the things that we know we can do in order to get to that goal, but it's not going to get us, it's going to get us to half of the goal. We'll need to be much more innovative in order to achieve that particular goal. And it managed to really orchestrate the community, its various stakeholders, to the point where it is delivering on digital innovation to actually deliver on that particular goal. And so having that vision right, and having a vision that really matters to the society, in this case Copenhagen and their green agenda, that's been an incredible accelerator to the smart city effort that's happening in Copenhagen. What a number of cities have done very well is understand how to govern this. So, as I mentioned before, this cannot be the business of the IT director, and nor does this does digitization or a smart city project belong to one vertical department. This should be managed horizontally, and preferably it should be up there in the hierarchy. If this is at the bottom of the hierarchy, no one is going to take it very serious. What I think is a nice example is the Digital Nation program in Singapore, which is a horizontal type of outfit. It needs to work with the various vertical ministries, departments in Singapore. It reports directly to the Prime Minister's department, and I think it's a good example. You know, organizing an entity, providing it with the mandate, right, to organize this well, and allow that organization to work with the various verticals that the municipality, or in Singapore, city, state, national government, is going to have and is going to continue to have. So they've done that particularly well, and it's contributed to their success to a great extent. Another element is the ability to rethink what constitutes an effective public-private partnership in this space. So there's plenty of markets, communities, cultures where the sheer mention of the term public-private partnership induces horror, a sense of fatigue, at a minimum, headaches, because people think of large pre-agreed investments, 100 lawyers working on 1,400-page documents, you know, and the vehicles becoming so inert, so immovable, that they're actually not all that great to facilitate innovations. And those concerns are right, but I think that a number of communities have proved to be really effective at rethinking what constitutes an effective public-private partnership in this space. And very often it's not as fixed as the traditional public-private partnerships that we typically leverage for highway investments, for instance, over the past many decades. It can be much looser. And it depends on the particular projects and investments involved. But to get that right and to rethink what a public-private partnership constitutes is critical. And I think those communities that have been most successful have figured out how to make that work. So these are some of the elements that I've seen.
And now, of course, in the last 6 minutes or so, we need you to think ahead to 2018. 2017 was a big year for smart city development, for this partnership, the World Smart City Forum, bringing together ISO and ITU and IEC. You've got these three significant organizations that have agreed to do some important collaborating with each other. If you had the ear of the three leaders who run those international agencies, can you talk a little bit about how you think they might help to reimagine the public-private partnerships that they could develop, linking international agencies together with the world's national governments, together with the world's cities, together with some of the corporates who either run the grid or run the network or are providing urban services, transport, energy, whatever. Can you maybe imagine, in a conversation with you and the three at the table who represent the three leaders running these three international organizations, what kind of thinking would you want them to bring to 2018, including this whole reimagining public-private partnerships?
So I think the X marks the spot, right? And then the question is, where exactly do we see the X here on the map of 2018? And I think it's increasingly clear that the X is at the at the adjacencies of traditional businesses and policies. It's where different verticals, different industries actually meet. So think of the IT industry, and as I mentioned, I've used the example already, the IT industry and the light industry, where they meet, where the adjacencies are addressed. That's where the stuff is happening. That's where the standards emerge. That's where people get pushed to new standards. Um, so if a light vendor says, look, we're going to stick to our proprietary stuff, but they're going to be left out because they're not going to be able to integrate into larger open, seamless, and secure architectures, then they're going to lose out on business. So it's through the adjacencies that those companies get pushed to a level where they're ready to open up, to be interoperable, and to work on new standards. Again, so it's the adjacency there. Adjacencies is also where we're going to figure out how we're going to manage data better. So we have this hopeless type of choice where we're going to say, who's going to govern our data? Is government going to do that? Well, most people in the United States would say, no, not in your mind. Not, we're never. This is never going to happen. We don't trust government to manage our data. But then in Europe, most people would probably say, well, we don't trust Apple and Google to do that. Really, I mean, we don't want that. We actually prefer government to do that. I think actually probably neither side is really, fitted to deal with this job. The average civil servant can't really, it would require so much training, and these organizations are simply not ready to manage with data governance. I think what we're going to need is to, again, to address the adjacency. So where does public and private meet, and how can we build the type of environment where we jointly manage data well? And I think at one point what we're going to need is some type of what you could call an Internet of Things utility for our communities, where we see traditional telcos, traditional energy utilities, municipalities, innovators meet and actually create organizations that become the utility of the future, that will be entrusted with managing our data, and that have the people that have the skill sets to manage all of this. I think the question as to how to manage this, and the early answers to that question are going to be on the horizon of 2018, and again, they're going to emerge by addressing the adjacency. Here, the adjacency being public, energy utilities, telcos coming together. So I don't know whether that addresses you had a very tall or very big question. I could answer.
Yeah, of course, and it was unfair because you didn't have any warning about this, but I think you hit the nail on the head, which is that, if we're looking around the corner at 2018, and we're thinking about, creating breakthroughs and maybe accelerating the path to those breakthroughs, not just for cities, but for the other actors on the city stage, whether it's a utility, electric utility, gas utility, water utility, or communications and information utility, whoever that utility of the future is. They are going to depend on ISO, they're going to depend on ITU, they're going to depend on the IEC. Hopefully they'll come to the World Smart Cities Forum and be part of that community. Hopefully they'll engage with you in your new role at Rainmakers Urban. Maybe you want to say a little bit about what you imagine the academy might be in this regard, because all of those people who are going to be responsible for thinking about the utility of the future or the city of the future are people that are looking for better skills and better insights to take to their work on this big challenge. So maybe a few words in closing about what you'll be doing in 2018 and how that might look for you.
Well, that's a nice question here, Gordon. So yeah, Rainmaking is a group born out of Europe. They're best known for their accelerator network called Startup Bootcamp. It's the most successful non-US born accelerator network. They operate in various verticals. Their main mission is innovation. We're building a new vertical company. Vertical's not entirely the right word, but a new company called Rainmaking Urban, which is completely focused on the smart city space. And what we're trying to do is to bring together investors, living labs, cities, big corporates in ways to manage innovative programs, smart city strategies better than they have so far. That's the larger mission, if you will, Rainmaking Urban. One of the things that it's going to do is to build a global smart city academy. And there's various initiatives out there. I hope we're going to have many of those initiatives. We need many smart city academies, in fact. But what is going to be important is we're going to be working with a number of cities and leverage their best practices. Some cities are maybe really front runners in artificial intelligence and applying it to their streets. Others may be best in smart energy grids, for instance, and others may actually be best at mobility and have the cutting edge experience to share. So we want these cities to be anchor providers, if you will, of some of that know-how, which translates into master classes. So this is going to be my mission, and I really look forward to that.
Well, we have to thank you. We're at the top of the hour. We encourage all of those who are listening to be in touch with us on the worldsmartcity.org website. We can follow tweets at World Smart City. We can encourage people to be in touch with us with their questions and comments. We do encourage them to buy your book because I have a copy and it really was very helpful. Santa has promised to deliver them on timely manner for those who need to get them under their Christmas tree this year. But we are seriously thankful to you, Bas, for bringing us all of this today. And we're appreciating our audience participating live and all those who are going to be joining us afterwards on YouTube, where this is all posted. So thanks to you all. We're signing off now, and we welcome your conversation with us in the months and years ahead.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.